Hello everyone, welcome to Explore Hop. So for this example, we're told that you roll 2 coins at the same time and repeat this 6 times. Then you obtain the following outcomes. So on trial 1, the outcome is heads tails. On trial 2, the outcome is heads heads. On trial 3, the outcome is heads tails. On trial 4, the outcome is tails heads. On trial 5, the outcome is tails tails. And on trial 6, the outcome is heads tails. And we let h be the number of heads. Determine the experimental and theoretical probabilities of this experiment. So let's first start by finding the sample space of this experiment so that we can find the theoretical probabilities. So first, we will create a tree diagram to visualize all the possible outcomes. So the tree diagram for this experiment looks like this. So we have the following tree diagram where we only have 2 possible outcomes on each coin, either heads or tails. Now we can determine all possible outcomes of this experiment. So the sample space is the set containing the outcomes heads heads, heads tails, tails heads, and tails tails. Now we can go ahead and find the theoretical probabilities. So we can find the theoretical probabilities for h equals 0 all the way up to h equals 2, since we can only have a maximum of 2 heads. So let's first find the probability of h being equal to 0, which is the probability of having 0 heads. So to do this, we just take the number of ways to have 0 heads divided by the total number of outcomes. So we can see that the only way to have 0 heads is if we have 2 tails. So this is going to be equal then to 1 over 4. Now to find the probability of h being equal to 1, which is the probability of having 1 head, we take the number of ways to have 1 head divided by the total number of outcomes. And we can see that there are 2 ways to have 1 head. We can either have heads tails or tails heads. So this is going to be equal to 2 over 4, which is equal to 1/2. And lastly, to find the probability of h being equal to 2, which is the probability of having 2 heads, we take the number of ways to have 2 heads and divide it by the total number of outcomes. So we can see from the sample space that there's only 1 outcome with 2 heads. So this is going to be equal to 1 over 4. Now to find the experimental probabilities, we take the number of times each event occurs and divide it by the total number of trials. So to find the experimental probability of having 0 heads, we see that we only had 1 trial where we had 0 heads, and that's trial 5, where we had 2 tails. So the experimental probability of having 0 heads is going to be equal to 1 over the total number of trials, which is 6. Likewise, to find the probability of having 1 head, we take the number of trials where we had 1 head and divide it by the total number of trials. So we see that we had 1 head in trial 1, trial 3, trial 4, and trial 6. So that's 4 outcomes where we had 1 head. So the probability of h being equal to 1 is equal to 4 over 6, which is equal to 2 over 3. And finally, to find the probability of h being equal to 2, which is the probability of having 2 heads, we go back to our table and we see that we have 2 heads only on trial 2. So the experimental probability of h being equal to 2 is going to be equal to 1 over 6. And now we can combine everything together using a table. So after creating a table, on the left column, we'll write down all the experimental probabilities. And on the right column, we'll list all the theoretical probabilities. So for h equals 0, the experimental probability is equal to 1/6. The theoretical probability is equal to 1/4. For h equals 1, the experimental probability is equal to 2/3. Theoretical probability is equal to 1/2. And for h equals 2, the experimental probability is equal to 1/6. And the theoretical probability is equal to 1/4. And that's it for this example. Thank you for joining us. See you in the next lesson.